The first rays of sunlight sliced through the acacia trees like golden knives, casting long, crooked shadows over the parched earth. A distant chorus of birds stirred the silence. But at the ranger station nestled on the edge of the African reserve, Malik was already wide awake. The morning air was crisp, heavy with the scent of dust and dew. He knelt by a cluster of disturbed grass, examining what only a trained eye would notice: claw marks in the dirt, a heavy, deliberate gait, dried blood, then fresh blood, a smear, then a trail. Malik's pulse quickened. It wasn't the usual spoor of an antelope or a stray hyena. These were the signs of a large predator, a leopard. But something was wrong. The prints were staggered, uneven. The blood was too bright, too abundant. The cat was hurt, badly. He rose to his feet slowly, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved but the tall grass swaying in the breeze. His radio crackled softly at his hip. But he didn't reach for it. Not yet. Malik had worked this land for almost a decade. He knew its sounds, its silences, and he knew the difference between a wounded animal and one that had been hunted. Poachers. His jaw clenched as the realization sank in. The reserves were protected, but protection was paper-thin out here. Somewhere out there, a trap had snapped shut around the leg of one of the reserve's most elusive predators. And now it was bleeding and on the run. Malik turned back to the station only long enough to grab his rifle, a canteen, and a field pack. He left a note on the board: out tracking injured leopard. Suspect poacher trap. Then he disappeared into the bush. Tracking a leopard was never easy. Tracking one that was wounded and desperate was like chasing smoke through a windstorm. The trail zigzagged, stopping frequently near trees and rocks, places the animal likely collapsed for a moment before pushing itself forward again. Malik moved fast but careful. Every broken twig, every drop of blood, every irregular paw print was a whisper from the land, urging him forward. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth beneath his boots. The blood trail became thinner, but still fresh. The leopard was alive, barely. He found the first sign of the trap in a clearing just past a dry riverbed. A patch of matted grass, a smear of fur, and beside it, the trap itself. Steel jaws, rusted and bent, stained with blood. Malik's face darkened as he crouched beside it. The poachers were getting bolder, setting traps closer to the inner border of the reserve. He scanned the surrounding trees. Buzzards circled in the far distance. Not yet. That meant the cat was still moving. Malik picked up the pace. By midday, the signs changed. No longer just blood and tracks. The leopard had started to lash out. He found deep gouges on the trunk of a marula tree. Fresh and angry, the big cat had reared up, possibly out of frustration or agony. Nearby, a bush was flattened where the animal had likely collapsed again. Malik crouched beside the spot and looked around. The silence was deeper here, heavy. Even the birds had quieted. He rose slowly, listening, a soft rustle behind him. He turned, rifle half raised. Nothing. Then, another movement, just beyond a clump of tall grass. He held his breath. A pair of amber eyes blinked at him. The leopard. It was lying low, nearly invisible in the brush despite its size. Its spotted coat blended perfectly with the dappled light. But Malik could see the trembling in its limbs. The way it kept weight off one foreleg. Blood soaked the fur near its shoulder and paw. The animal's breath came in ragged bursts. He lowered his rifle slowly. The cat watched him. They stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. Then the leopard growled, low and guttural. Not a warning, but pain, a raw, rumbling sound that seemed to shake the leaves. Malik knew he couldn't leave it here. If it collapsed now, the scavengers would come. If it kept running, it would bleed out before sunset. But approaching a wounded predator, even one this weak, was a dance with death. He reached slowly into his pack, pulled out a tranq dart and the rifle attachment. His fingers moved carefully, but his mind raced. If the shot was off, the animal could bolt, or charge. The leopard tensed. Malik raised the rifle, aimed for the flank. Breathe in. Steady. Breathe out. He fired. The dart hissed through the air and struck the cat just above the hip. The leopard snarled, leapt up with a burst of desperate strength, then staggered sideways and crashed to the ground. Malik waited. Seconds passed, then minutes. The cat didn't move. He approached cautiously. The rise and fall of its chest told him it was still alive. Tranquilized, he knelt beside the animal. Heart pounding. The trap had torn deep into the paw. Bone was exposed. Infection had likely already begun. Malik swore under his breath and opened his medical kit. He worked fast, cleaning the wound, wrapping it, injecting antibiotics. It wasn't enough. It was only a stopgap. But it might buy them time. He radioed the station. Backup would take hours. They were short-staffed, and the terrain was rough. So he stayed. All afternoon, he sat beside the leopard, his rifle across his knees, watching the sun slip westward. The animal stirred once or twice but didn't wake. Malik kept a hand near its side, feeling each slow breath. He thought about the poachers, their cruelty, their greed. They'd set the trap and left, expecting an easy kill. But this leopard had fought back. It had run. It had survived. And now it was his responsibility. As dusk approached, he heard the rumble of an engine in the distance. Relief washed over him. The medevac jeep. Finally. He stood, waved his arms, and the vehicle changed course, bouncing over the dry ground toward him. The leopard would get a second chance. But Malik knew this was only the beginning. If poachers were this deep into the reserve, it wasn't a mistake, it was a message. And Malik was ready to answer it. The heat was merciless. By early afternoon, the savannah shimmered like glass under a blowtorch sky. Every breath of wind was hot and dry, kicking up dust and sand that clung to Malik's sweat-drenched skin. His shirt stuck to his back, and his boots felt like they were dragging through tar. Still, he pressed forward. He didn't have time to think about the sun blistering above or the weight of fatigue pressing down on him. All that mattered now was the trail, the blood that had grown thinner but hadn't stopped. A ghost of red, marking the struggle of an animal that refused to die. Then he saw it, a limp form, curled in the tall grass ahead. Malik dropped to a crouch. Eyes narrowed against the glare. It was the leopard, barely breathing, sides rising and falling in shallow, erratic rhythm. Flies swarmed around the blood-caked fur. One foreleg jutted out at an unnatural angle, soaked in a deep maroon. The cat's tongue lolled from its mouth, its tail twitching weakly. Malik approached slowly. The leopard stirred, growling, a low, warning sound that barely carried. It tried to lift its head, but the effort drained what little strength it had left. Then Malik froze. The pattern of the spots, the scar above the left eye, the darker rosettes around the shoulders. He knew this leopard. His breath caught. Shadow. The name escaped his lips like a whisper. Years ago, 7, maybe 8, he had found a leopard cub caught in a snare not far from this very region. Barely a few months old. It had been left to die. Malik had cut it loose, cleaned the wound, fed it by hand, kept it hidden and safe until it could walk on its own. He never named animals, too risky in his line of work, but this one had followed him for weeks after. A silent shadow in the trees. And then one day, it vanished into the wild. Now it lay dying in front of him. He didn't hesitate. He slipped off his pack, tore open the medical pouch. His shirt came off next, ripped into strips. He cleaned the wound as best he could, using water sparingly. The infection was worse than he'd feared. Swollen flesh, heat radiating off the limb. Still, the cat was alive. He wrapped the leg tightly, binding the strips of fabric in practiced knots. Shadow let out a low, broken sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whimper. "I know," Malik murmured. "I know it hurts." Once the leg was secure, Malik sat back for a moment, staring at the horizon. The nearest outpost was 20 kilometers away. The heat showed no signs of letting up. Radio contact was dead in this area. He had one choice: carry him. He slipped his arms under the cat's body, gently lifting until the weight settled across his shoulders. Shadow groaned but didn't fight. He had nothing left. Malik rose to his feet, every muscle groaning in protest. The leopard's weight was solid, more than 70 kilos of muscle and bone. Barely softened by exhaustion, Malik took a single step forward. Then another. The journey began. The first kilometer was brutal. The cat's body radiated heat, adding to the inferno surrounding them. Malik's boots slid over dry earth and sharp stones. His breathing turned ragged fast, and sweat poured from his skin in sheets. But he didn't stop. He focused on the rhythm. One step, then another. He thought of Shadow as a cub, tiny, trembling, with wide, unblinking eyes. He remembered feeding it goat's milk with a rubber tube, its tongue curling around his fingers, its faint purrs. Now it was silent. Time lost meaning. He passed a dried-up waterhole, its cracked mud yawning like a wound in the land. A dead tree loomed nearby, blackened by lightning. Vultures wheeled overhead, watching with lazy anticipation. Malik stumbled once, fell to a knee. His vision blurred, but the weight on his back shifted, and he felt the faintest twitch of movement. Shadow. Still alive. That was enough. He pushed up and kept going. By the halfway point, his legs trembled with every step. His shoulders screamed. He was running on instinct now. Eyes scanning for shade, water, anything. At a small rocky outcrop, he found a puddle, stagnant, but wet. He dropped to the ground, eased the leopard off his shoulders, and soaked a cloth, pressing it to Shadow's muzzle. The cat's eyes opened for a moment. Cloudy, tired, but there. "You're not dying out here," Malik said, voice hoarse. "Not today." He poured a few drops into the leopard's mouth. Shadow swallowed. Barely. Then, after barely 5 minutes of rest, Malik lifted him again, and walked. He passed the burned wreck of an old poacher's hide. Charred branches, rusted metal, bones, a grim reminder of what awaited animals like Shadow if no one fought for them. He kept going. 3 more kilometers. His lips cracked from the dryness. His vision swam. He felt the early signs of heatstroke clawing at him, lightheadedness, nausea, but he saw the ridge. Beyond it lay the dirt road. And beyond that, the outpost. He stumbled up the incline, breath ragged, pain lancing through his spine. At the top, he collapsed, gasping. There, in the distance, was the station's antenna. He was close. One final push. Malik forced himself to stand. The world reeled around him. He took 1 step, then 2. The final stretch blurred into a nightmare of pain and sunlight. Then, shouts, movement, figures running toward him. He dropped to his knees just as hands grabbed his arms. Voices called his name. Shadow slid from his shoulders gently, caught by a ranger in a green vest. Malik collapsed. Later, under the shade of the outpost canopy, an IV in his arm and cold water trickling down his throat. Malik opened his eyes. "How's the cat?" he croaked. The medic beside him smiled faintly. "Still alive. We've stabilized him. You did good." Malik let out a shaky breath. Relief, exhaustion, gratitude. He didn't say anything more. Words weren't necessary. He'd made a promise years ago, to protect what couldn't protect itself. And today, he kept it. The heat never let up. As Malik pushed forward, each step was a negotiation between will and collapse. The dry air tore at his lungs. His lips were cracked and bleeding. And the world tilted a little more with every kilometer. Still, he carried Shadow. The leopard, though barely conscious, stirred from time to time, soft, pained groans that reminded Malik he wasn't alone in this. The animal's breath was shallow but steady. Its head rested near Malik's shoulder, warm despite its weakened state. They were halfway back to the outpost when it happened. It was fast, quicker than a blink. Malik stepped through a patch of tall grass, and a flash of movement caught the corner of his eye. A hiss, then a sharp pain, like a white-hot needle stabbing into his lower leg. He stumbled back, almost dropping Shadow. A snake, small, brown, fast, gone before he could react. His calf burned instantly. He staggered to one knee, clutching the wound. Blood was already mixing with a thin trickle of venom under the surface of his skin. His breath caught. Panic clawed at the edges of his mind. He knew the signs, knew the risk. No antivenom, no help nearby. He looked at Shadow, lying limp in the dirt. The leopard raised its head. Ever so slightly. Its eyes found his, and it gave a faint, broken chuff, a sound not of fear, but connection. Stay awake, stay moving. Malik bit down hard on his own tongue, pain to push back the fog already beginning to rise in his brain. He tore open his medkit, found the compression bandage, and wrapped it tightly above the bite. He forced himself up. The pain was growing. His leg felt like it was swelling with fire. Dizziness pulled at him. Sweat poured from him in torrents. But he gritted his teeth and lifted the leopard again. He could still walk. He had to walk. The next few kilometers were pure torture. The venom clawed through his body like barbed wire. His vision blurred in waves. His heartbeat pounded in his skull. Too fast, too loud. His steps were erratic now. Staggered. Shadow's weight, once steady on his back, felt like a mountain. He collapsed once, then twice. The second time, he didn't move right away. He just lay there, gasping, his face pressed to the burning earth. The sun beat down on him, and the sky spun. A soft sound reached his ears. Shadow. A low, wounded groan. Malik lifted his head. The leopard was trying to rise. It didn't have the strength. But it was trying. Limbs trembling. Head lolling. Eyes locked on him. It made another sound. Soft but insistent. Like it was calling him back. He reached out, resting a hand on the leopard's shoulder. Not yet. He whispered. We're not done. With everything he had, Malik rolled to his side. Pushed himself upright. Blood rushed to his head like a wave of heat. But he stayed up. Slowly, he draped Shadow across his shoulders again, biting back a scream as his poisoned leg buckled. And then he walked. 1 step. 2. 1,000 more. The sky changed before the land did. A strange silence crept over the plains. The birds vanished. The air grew heavy, not hot, but thick. Malik squinted ahead. A wall of dust was rising on the horizon. A sandstorm. He felt it before he fully saw it, hot winds swirling, pushing sand into his eyes. His mouth, under his clothes. The sun disappeared behind a curtain of grit. The sky turned copper, then black. The wind howled like a beast. Malik dropped to the ground instinctively, curling around Shadow. His body covered the leopard's, shielding it from the sand and the shards of debris flying through the air. He pulled his tattered shirt over their heads, forming a makeshift barrier. Sand stung every exposed inch of skin. His eyes burned. He couldn't see, couldn't breathe, but he held on. His body, already battered and poisoned, screamed for relief. Still, he didn't move. He lay there, protecting the animal beneath him, holding it the way you'd shield a brother, or a child, or a part of yourself too sacred to lose. The storm howled. Minutes passed, then more. Malik's arms started to go numb. His legs stopped responding. He couldn't tell if he was slipping into sleep or unconsciousness. The pain in his leg faded, not because it stopped, but because his mind was shutting down. But even through the roar of the storm, he felt a warm breath against his neck. Shadow. alive. When the storm finally passed, it left silence in its wake. The world was coated in dust. The grass lay flat. The sun returned, pale and distant. Malik pushed himself up slowly. His muscles barely obeyed. He pulled the cloth away and blinked against the sudden light. Shadow stirred beneath him, blinking slowly. Still here. Still alive. He couldn't carry him anymore. Not like before. His body wouldn't allow it. So he dragged. He wrapped the leopard in the torn remnants of his shirt and pulled. Step by step, every few meters he stopped to breathe. To not vomit from the dizziness. To keep from blacking out. He talked to Shadow while he moved. Stupid things. Half sentences. Stories from the ranger station. Names of animals they'd both seen. "You remember that lion that stole my boot?" he muttered. "I nearly cried. You watched the whole thing. Didn't even help." The leopard made no sound. But its head rested against Malik's arm. Gently. Hours later, the radio crackled. Malik didn't hear it at first. Then came the voices, shouts. Boots pounding the dirt. He lifted his head. Figures. Rangers. Running toward him. He tried to speak but managed only a rasp. Then everything went black. He woke up in the medical bay. Hooked to tubes. His leg wrapped and elevated. The venom hadn't reached his heart. He'd made it just in time. He turned his head. Through the glass partition, he saw a cot. Shadow lay curled on it. Leg bandaged. A light oxygen mask over its face. A vet stood beside it. Checking vitals. Malik smiled faintly. They had made it. In the days that followed, both man and leopard healed slowly. Word of the journey spread through the reserve. Rangers came to see them both, some in awe, some shaking their heads in disbelief. But Malik didn't care about the attention. He only cared about Shadow, who, after 3 days, raised his head when Malik entered the enclosure. Eyes bright and aware. They locked eyes again. Not as predator and human. Not even as savior and saved. But as something else. Survivors. Bound not by species, but by struggle. Two beings who had crossed the line between life and death, and brought each other back. The horizon was a blur. A smear of pale color against the brutal brightness of the savannah. Malik's world had narrowed to a tunnel of pain, dust, and soundless determination. He could no longer feel his legs, only the weight dragging behind him and the burning in his chest that told him he was still alive. Each step felt like it might be the last. But there, rising like a mirage through the waves of heat, was the rescue station, the antenna, the metal roof, the old water tank, familiar, so close, 300 meters, less than the length of a lap around the training grounds back when he was young and fast and untouchable. Now, every meter was agony. Shadow whimpered behind him. The leopard had stopped moving. Its breathing shallow, head limp. Malik could barely speak anymore. His throat had cracked dry long ago. But he whispered hoarsely. "Just a little more. You hold on." He knelt, fingers digging into the hot earth. And began to push. Not carry, not drag. Push. He rolled Shadow onto a piece of tarp he had salvaged from his bag. Tied to what was left of his belt. and used the last of his weight to slide the animal forward. 1 meter, then another. His arms trembled, raw from the sandstorm and snakebite. His eyes were half shut, lids swollen, dust caked into the corners. 200 meters. A cry tried to rise in his chest, but it came out as a ragged breath. He collapsed face first in the dirt. He lay there, cheek pressed against the hot ground, unmoving. Then he lifted his head again. He turned his body and used his feet, kicking, pushing, shoving the tarp forward. His shoulders were on fire, his hands bleeding from crawling over stones and thorns. He didn't notice. His mind was on one thing: get Shadow to the edge. He reached the outer fence. Then the gate. It was half open. The final few meters. He rolled the leopard onto his arms and carried him, staggering and gasping, toward the shaded border of the station. He crossed the line. Then he collapsed completely. He pushed Shadow forward with his last movement, just far enough that the animal's body rolled into the shaded area of the outpost. Then Malik's own body dropped. Still, face turned to the side, eyes half open, unmoving. The ranger station had been preparing for a routine patrol when the alert came through. A watchtower scout spotted movement, something dragging itself from the bush. They rushed outside. First, they saw the leopard, lying just beyond the outer post, wrapped in strips of fabric, half buried in dust. Then they saw the man, face down, skin gray, blood and sweat and sand streaked across his back. Malik. They ran. Chaos followed. Hands lifted his body, called for stretchers. 2 rushed to check on the leopard, while others worked on the ranger who had returned from the edge of death itself. Malik's pulse was weak, breathing erratic. His shirt was soaked with blood, some his own, some the leopard's. A medic shouted instructions as they began CPR. One ranger paused, wide-eyed. He carried it all the way. Another nodded, stunned. 20 kilometers, with a snake bite. Inside the emergency bay, Shadow was stabilized quickly. Fluids, sedatives, oxygen. The wounds were cleaned again. Infection managed. Malik, on the other hand, was fading. He regained consciousness once. Voices surrounded him, muffled, panicked. Someone was holding his hand. He couldn't see clearly, just shapes, bright lights, shadows moving. His lips cracked as he tried to speak. No words came. Then, another shape. A familiar one. 4 legs. A spotted body, lying nearby on a raised platform, just visible through a glass partition. Shadow. Alive. Malik smiled. Tiny, weak, but it was a smile. Then everything went dark again. They worked through the night to stabilize him. IVs, anti-venom, fluids, oxygen. His organs had begun to fail. Dehydration, venom, exhaustion. The doctor said it was a miracle he made it even those last few meters. Another minute, another step too late, and they would have lost him. But the body has its own logic. And sometimes, it listens to the soul. In the days that followed, Malik drifted between consciousness and fever dreams. He spoke in fragments, half-remembered patrol calls, Old ranger slogans. Names of animals long gone. But every time he opened his eyes, he looked first for Shadow. The leopard, recovering quickly, had become a quiet presence near his bed. It had refused to stay in the vet wing, growling low whenever moved. The rangers eventually gave up and let it stay. Not in the same room, but close enough that Malik could see the familiar spotted coat through the window. By the fourth day, Malik opened his eyes and said clearly, "He made it." A medic smiled. "Yes, he did, thanks to you." The story spread like wildfire, not just across the reserve, but into cities, conservation networks, wildlife journals. A ranger who braved heatstroke, a snake bite, and a sandstorm to save a single leopard. A predator that remembered its rescuer. A man who collapsed at salvation's edge. Not for glory, but because he wouldn't let a creature die alone in the wild. They called it heroism. Malik didn't care for the word. When he finally stood again, leaning on a cane, Shadow walked beside him, not leashed, not bound, just there. Two survivors. Scarred, but standing. They had made it together. Weeks later, as the sun rose over the savannah, Malik returned to the place he found Shadow, now stronger, alert, and eager to run. He knelt down and looked into the cat's golden eyes. "You're free now," he said softly. The leopard blinked slowly, then turned. It padded away into the wild. Slow at first, then vanishing like smoke into the trees. Malik stood alone, hands at his sides, smiling, because this was the job. Not just protecting land or law, but protecting life. Even if it cost your own. Even if no one ever knew. And sometimes, when you're lucky, you live long enough to see it walk away. Alive. 1 week had passed. The wounds on Malik's body were healing. But slowly, the venom had left lasting damage. His leg was still wrapped. His movement limited. But he was alive. Alive because he refused to quit. Alive because something more than survival had pushed him forward. And somewhere out there, that something had a name. Shadow. The days were quiet now. Mornings filled with the chirps of distant birds and the rustling of grass outside the medical bay window. Rangers came and went with updates and kind smiles. Some brought food, others just stood silently, unsure of what to say to the man who had nearly given his life for a leopard. But Malik didn't want words. He wanted silence. Silence was where trust lived. Silence was where he and Shadow had always understood each other best. It was early morning, just after sunrise, when Malik first heard the soft sound outside his room. A rustle of movement, not human, quieter, more deliberate. He turned his head toward the door. And then he saw him. Shadow. The leopard walked calmly into the room, not guided, not escorted. The rangers had tried to contain him that morning. As usual, but somehow, he'd gotten free. He didn't run. He didn't growl. He didn't pace like a caged animal desperate for freedom. He walked straight to the bed. Malik stared, unable to speak. Shadow stopped beside him, eyes calm. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Malik's chest tightened, not from pain, but from something deeper, something wordless. Then, slowly, The leopard lay down, not at Malik's feet, not near the door, but beside him, his body parallel to Malik's, as if guarding him, grounding him. And then came the moment no one could explain, no one could have predicted. Shadow rested his head gently on Malik's chest. Just there, still, eyes closed. Malik's hand, trembling, moved to rest on the leopard's head. Fingers brushed the short, coarse fur, the familiar warmth, the breath that rose and fell in sync with his own. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. This was not a dramatic reunion. It was something quieter, a bond, rebuilt, unbroken, unshakable. Someone had left a camera in the corner of the room, a small motion sensor unit used to monitor Malik's recovery. It captured everything. The image spread faster than any ranger report, any press release, any official statement ever could. A wounded ranger in a hospital bed. A leopard lying beside him, its head on his chest. The picture flooded social media. Wildlife organizations, news networks, and conservation pages shared it with captions like, "The Protector and the Protected." A bond beyond species. What trust looks like. But the moment needed no title. People felt it. And for a flicker of time, the world stopped arguing, stopped doubting, and just stared at what had happened when a human chose to care without condition, and when nature, usually so distant, chose to trust in return. Malik recovered slowly but surely. Each day, he walked a few steps more. Each night, Shadow waited by the outer wall of the clinic. Never far. Veterinarians examined the leopard daily. His leg had healed with astonishing speed. His appetite had returned, and his temperament remained calm. But he refused to leave the compound entirely. Not yet. Not until Malik could stand on his own. 2 weeks later, Malik stepped outside without assistance. The sun warmed his face, and he breathed in the scent of earth and life. A soft growl came from his right. Shadow. Malik turned. The leopard approached. Slow and easy, they walked side by side toward the open plain. No leash. No fence. Just a man and a wild animal. 2 survivors. The board of the conservation reserve held an emergency meeting. Normally, protocol and precedent guided the decisions. But nothing about this story was normal. And in the wake of worldwide attention, donations had poured in, enough to fund ranger teams, equipment, and anti-poaching patrols for years. But more than money, something else had been gifted to the reserve. Hope. And so, they decided, on a cloudless afternoon, the entire staff of the reserve gathered in a small clearing not far from the ranger station. A temporary cloth covered a stone plinth. Newly installed. Beside it, 2 figures stood. One was Malik, still limping, but upright and proud. The other, Shadow, who sat at his side like a sentinel. The cloth was pulled away. The statue beneath was simple, but powerful. Bronze, life-sized, a ranger in mid-stride. One hand outstretched, steady and calm. Beside him, a leopard, not crouching, not snarling, but walking in sync, shoulder to shoulder. No pedestal, no separation, just unity. At the base, A small plaque read, "To the bond that saved a life. To the life that trusted a man. A tribute to faith between species. Malik and Shadow." No speech followed. Only silence. The kind Malik loved. The kind where everything worth saying already lived. After the ceremony, Shadow was released once again into the wild. No tracking collar, no cage, just an open gate and the setting sun. He paused for a long moment, looking back. Then he vanished into the trees. Malik watched until the last flick of his tail was gone. Then he turned and walked back to the station, alone. But never really alone again. Because somewhere out there, a leopard named Shadow moved through the wilderness with the knowledge that once a human carried him through fire and death, not for profit, not for pride, but because it was right. And now, the world remembered, not just with words, but in bronze, and in silence.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.